school break. Shane Pearson, he's one of our two technologists. We'll start with part one of Converge Cloud.
Okay, good morning, everybody. So a little delay, we'll get going. So Shane Pearson, happy to be here, live in Colorado. Somehow Nigel and I both live in Colorado and have come down here for the cloud meeting. And what I want to do is just get us started. So my job is a couple things. One, to stay on time, because we like to chat and talk and whatnot. But I would encourage you to ask questions while we're going along. What I'm going to do is try and share with you our point of view, as I would call it, on what is cloud, why do people care about it, what we're seeing. And so really define that. And then what we're going to do is both Nigel and I are going to do deep dives as we go into the day, and we have some other speakers. So what I want to do is just lay that out for you, and we'll go from there. Before I start, what is cloud? Before I start talking about what I think it is, who in here has a nice definition of cloud that they like? I'm going to make you guys work too. So somebody has to give me an answer before we get going. So who's it going to be? I've seen Tim. He's out there tweeting already. He's got a whole bunch. I'm going to ask for a volunteer, otherwise I'm going to call on somebody. It won't be Nigel. So Diego.
So what is cloud? Cloud to me is working the storage space outside my local area where I hold my data.
Okay, I'll take that. I'll take that. To me, and I'll get into this, a lot of what people are seeing with cloud is it's a way, quite frankly, to access technology in a utility model. And that is a game changer. And what we're seeing with cloud, and for me, I hate to admit it because now I've been doing technology for about 20 years and I got all this gray coming in on my sideburns. But it's just like the internet in the 90s to me as far as the disruption, only it's bigger. Because when that was happening, it, I think, took a little time for people to really understand the IT and the enterprise implications. That is not the case with cloud. Everybody sees it's huge. And now what people are trying to figure out is how do I make it work for me, whether that's from a technology standpoint or a business standpoint. So when we look at this, the thing about cloud is not just, wow, it's big. I think people see that. It's but how do I really make it work? What's the right way to use it? And so we spend a lot of time talking with customers. And the point of this slide is not about the numbers. To me, you can ignore that. It's about cloud is impacting every part of the market. So whether it's the build side, I'm going to build my own IT center because that's the right thing for me, or it's the manage. You know, I don't want to build it. I basically want to rent to own or lease, or I'm just going to go run on the public cloud. Every part of the cloud delivery model market is growing, and people are experimenting. And then the really interesting part is people are playing around with models where they source from all of those. And that's why I think when you ask what is cloud, if I ask 10 people, I might get 20 answers. I might get 30. And that's because really there is no single answer. And we're working that out. But generally there's commonalities because people are looking at how do I take that to simplify it, that utility model for computing, and best make it work for my business or my enterprise. So a few things we hear from customers along those lines. So the first thing is, how do I leverage cloud to make it work for me? And I say that because it's one of those things where not only do people want to get it right, in some ways they don't want to get it wrong because they're afraid they're going to miss out on something that will really help them either change the dynamics of their cost structure or grow their business. And I think that's also an important thing to bring up. I feel like I need to stand to the side so people can take pictures. When people look at this, it's not just about saving money. A lot of early cloud was, ooh, I'll just move it all out to the public cloud and save all this money because I won't have people, I won't have infrastructure. We've kind of gotten past that part of it. And it really is the balancing, how do I maybe change my cost structure so that I can do more with the assets I have. But a lot of it's how do I create new business revenue streams? How do I create net new businesses? How do I take all this great data I have, which just comes up all the time when I'm talking to customers. I've got all this great proprietary data, and we had this idea on how to turn that into a new revenue stream. How do we use the cloud to accelerate that development? And then lastly, cloud development models. How do I build and deliver an application and service are dynamically different than the way traditional IT has worked many times. And it's not just the technology, there's also cultural issues that come up. How do I deliver a workload? How do I allow people to change a workload? How do I allow people to access and use my private cloud resources versus my public cloud resources. So there's a lot of different issues that come up that you have to think about. And the reason is because mistakes are really, really painful at times. So we had a question about security. What if you are using the public cloud or exposing out your private cloud to third parties? How do you secure that? How do you manage that? How do you control access? There's a lot of different issues that come up because suddenly now your I guess, risk or business risk might be different. So when I look at this, or like when Nigel and I sit around talking and other people, at the end of the day, it's about applications and workloads, which really is why IT is here. That's what we're doing. We're delivering some type of application. There's many different types, and the reason that's important is not every application has the same requirements. So when you start talking about cloud, what workloads or applications you're going to run is really kind of where you need to start. So it's not cloud for cloud's sake. It's what part of my business do I want to leverage cloud computing or cloud resources, and what am I comfortable with running on the cloud? Because it might not be everything. And for example, I see very few people looking to move their internal financial applications out to the public cloud. They're not going to do that. They're going to run those internally. Now they might use cloud computing to support that and to scale it out or to build new applications to access that data. But there's core apps or core mission critical applications that they're going to treat very differently than they might a mobile application or a net new customer-facing application. So we talk about application sourcing strategy with every single customer that we go out and talk to. So what you're going to hear us today is use some common use cases when we talk about customers and what they're doing in cloud. And these are use cases that about 1.5 years ago, when we were really trying to understand our cloud strategy to HP, myself and a group, we literally went out and talked to hundreds of customers and just kept asking them, well, what are the applications you're doing? What are the things you're doing? And for better or worse, we came up with this nice little model that we've been using for these kind of 5 core use cases. And I don't present this to say it's right or wrong. It's just a way for us to start grouping what people are doing with cloud. And there's some similarities to these, but there's also some things that tend to be very specific. And so dev test is something we talk about all the time because this is a core part of how do I deliver solutions and applications. And there's 2 parts of it. One, how am I using cloud to do that? And I'll talk a lot about that this afternoon when we do cloud management kind of drill down. And it's also how do I change the way I give developers tools to deliver. And there's a large self-service component to that that cloud really accelerates. And then there's really the core production workloads that tend to be on private clouds for the enterprise, or they're on public, or they're hybrid across. And so this is when you really talk about, for many people, SLAs, mission criticality. These are my core production applications that must be running 24/7, 365 days a year so that my business is successful. But then there's also smaller things where it's I just want to put up an application to support a marketing program, and I want to set it up, turn it on, and I want it to run for 7 days or 30 days or whatever, and then I want to tear it down and have it go away. So that whole model, in the good old days, I might have had to procure a whole system. It might have taken 6 months to set up, and then I could have run my campaign for 7 days, and then what do I do with this hardware? And the reality is a lot of things wouldn't have happened because that whole cost and upfront everything was too much from an ROI standpoint for the marketing campaign. So those are just 2 different examples. And then we'll talk about service providers, which is obviously another way to deliver applications. Go ahead, Tim. Where'd the mic go? Chris has got the mic. Tim has a question. I'll let you ask questions without the mic, but he probably won't. Oh yeah, just go ahead and let's go.
So a lot of times, people are using cost as the big driver to move to cloud, and your slide kind of exemplifies this a bit. Okay,
Yeah,
so
these are the slides the marketing guys give.
yeah, a lot of times, people are using cost as the reason to move to cloud, and the slide kind of talks to that, right? It talks more about TCO, about cost savings, server count. Are you starting to see maybe more complex use cases coming out, or different drivers beyond just cost? Because cost is, from my experience, cost is not always the driver to move to cloud, but it always seems to be the starting point that people use as the validation or the place to start, right?
Yeah. Great question. So to me, and this is what I was trying to allude to as we set this up. In the customer examples, I want to drill into a little more before we start going into some of the architecture and technology. You see that happening. So and to me, this happens with a lot of discussions. They'll even frame it of, well, my reason for saving costs is to free up assets, resources, money to go do something more interesting. And I think that happens a lot. So GS1 fits into this example. What they were doing is, they manage supply chains. And so what they were trying to do is provide a way that they could take their existing business process and have more people be able to access it, but then also automate how it works. Because what they're really doing is managing data. So you collect a lot of data on products, but then how do I provide a scalable application that people can access that information? And so it used to take a lot of time to roll out the updates, and they didn't expose it to as many people as they could because they weren't sure. Well, I guess they weren't as sure they could scale it up. And so they moved that solution to a cloud-based resource for two reasons. One, they could split up and have the people who were putting the data in have a way to access it. And then also for people using the application, they could scale that up independently. And just one example of, could you have done this without a cloud application? Sure. But from their standpoint, it would have been more expensive. And because it would have been more expensive, it would have prohibited them changing the business model. And so one of the things I talk about a lot of the time, the interesting thing about cloud is it gives you flexibility to change your business process or business model because of the cost dynamic. And so you might start with cost, but you end up with oh wow, this lets me do something brand new. And that's what they found when they were doing this. So I think what you're seeing now compared to say 2008. 2008 was all cost. And I would say even 2010, it was 90% cost. Now, it's 50-50, I think. People come into the room with okay, the cost part's interesting, but that doesn't get my business guy excited. Tell me how I help change his business so that they can go do more. Oh, back here. Yeah, go ahead.
Another reason, I think the explosion in cloud, it is faster than other technologies, is the availability of resources. This is very important. It's not just the cost. Technically, the majority of the customers, they need to deliver results in the short term, and when you can combine the private resources with the public cloud, is a major advantage for them. So many of them, they are moving faster for that reason as well. Okay.
Yeah. And I'll keep talking. I have a couple more customer examples. So DreamWorks is interesting, and we do talk about DreamWorks a little bit at HP because they're a fun customer and partner that we work with. And I think when you look at what they're doing, one, every time I talk to them, I learn something. It's amazing because the way they deliver their products is very different now than it was 5 or 10 years ago because of the trend of essentially entertainment all being digitally delivered now. So they now make their movies or shows and then deliver them digitally. And what's happening is that those assets are getting richer and richer in terms of media, which means they're getting bigger and bigger, which means the compute power or the storage power or the memory power that I would think of as a developer, they call them artists, needs to create a scene is just exponentially bigger today than it was 18 months ago or 18 months before that or 18 months before that. So when we talk to them, I mean, we could be talking to a financial company when you hear the discussions around the data and the security and how important it is for us to be able to help them allow the artist to create what they're trying to create. And so the way to think about this is, they're creating a scene that may take, gigabytes of dynamic storage and compute power, and they need to be able to turn that around so that what they're able to do is create that and then almost real time be able to see the effects. They don't want to wait for some batch job or for some extra compute power to open up, say 3 hours from now to see how their changes impacted, say, the scene they're working on. So what's interesting with them is They also didn't want to build that. That's not really what they do. They create movies. So what they worked with us to do was to build their private cloud and manage their private cloud. And then what they're able to do is access that, and that helps them on the cost side. But the thing that's really important is they're able to deliver for them what would be a new movie or TV show faster than they would if they were only using their own assets. And they're able to do it better because they're using our cloud in order to do that. So we focus on the IT aspect and the cloud aspects, and they let their artists focus on creating movies. This is something that you couldn't do what we're doing now 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and I would say the scale that it's changing is literally, probably less than 12 months, there's just changes in what we're able to do, compute and storage power, and it keeps growing. And they don't expect that to change. It's basically they will use as much memory and compute power as they possibly can, and they think these things are going to get richer and richer because it was 2D and now it's 3D, and every time you add more richness to it, they need more compute power, more storage power. And so while there is a cost component, it's really about how do we help them consistently deliver the best product at the end of the day. And the last one, and this is a financial company, I think this also gets to the balance between cost and revenue. So ING had a cost savings component that they were looking to do, and we're leveraging our both managed and public cloud services to do that. But at the end of the day, the reason they were trying to do that is so they could scale out new services to both their wealth community, and then also they white label a lot of these services. So they also wanted to be able to replicate those out to other companies that use their services. So there was a CapEx to OpEx model that always comes up with cloud services, but it was really the how do we change this so it's not just internally us using these services, but we can now make them available externally in the right way, in a way that meets regulations, which are very different from country to country, and do it in a way that is repeatable and is secure, because we're talking about high-end financial information. Did you get your picture, or you want me to go back? Sorry. Okay. So what you'll hear us do today is kind of go into different, what we usually refer to as delivery models. So you've got your traditional model, your private cloud, managed cloud, public cloud, but more often than not, and you saw this with the examples, what we're seeing people do is hybrid cloud, because what people have started to realize, it's not everything is moving to the public cloud, whether that's ours or Amazon or Rackspace or whatnot. It is about a sourcing strategy. So people are figuring out what are the right workloads or applications that make sense to be on the right delivery model. And then the other part is you're seeing composite applications where people are splitting the application into different parts. So maybe their data stays in either their traditional model or private cloud, and it's really the applications, whether it's mobile or a new business application that are getting deployed in a different cloud, or they're very specific applications. So they're comfortable with their CRM coming from Salesforce. Hey, great, so they've got a SAP application, but they might want to extend their management capability, their security out to that SaaS application. That's a very typical thing we see. And then it just comes back to sourcing strategy. What should go where and what's the right way for me to do it. To pause before I change slides. Go ahead.
Can we discuss for just a moment the software as a service? You mentioned financial, at the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned financial software. And let's put an example out there like QuickBooks. They are moving everybody to the cloud right now, or at least trying to do that. Our friend here, Tim, talked about money as one of the persuasions for to persuade companies to jump to the cloud. And I agree with that, and I also want to add the other side of the coin here is the infrastructure for telecommunications. You're talking about a company that would like to move their software as a service, and never done that before, even though the cloud has been there since like what, 1994? Since
in some way,
yeah.
Whether it was managed,
And
hosted,
of course, and how with infrastructure, I'm talking about connectivity here, and here in this region at least, we have a very big concern about connection with the internet, And the reliability of having a software as a service for a big company is a big issue in the Caribbean region, because we know, and if you've been here for a while, that our communications here are suffering from a lot of problems, with huge issues with latency and stuff like that, and other bureaucratic stuff that maybe you guys know about that, because of we have like the only 3 companies we can have internet from. The other are commercial lines and pipes, open pipes and stuff. So using the software as a service for HP, how do you guys work with companies to bring them reliability, even though HP is not an internet service provider?
Yep. Yeah, so that's a good question. There's a couple things there. I think, to me, let me break it down in a couple parts. So the first was the financial side, or financial applications. So I think that there's a very broad market there. For example, if you mention QuickBooks, to me that's going to be a small, medium business type of scenario versus someone who's a enterprise 500 or 2,000 company. I think the business risk for the small, medium business is probably different, obviously, for the Fortune 2000. And I think that, when I think about that, it's just, are they comfortable with that model or not? Or are they going to use that in conjunction with the traditional, on my PC version of QuickBooks? I think for the larger companies, it's a different discussion. And typically what I see is it's about acceptable business risk. So let's talk about connectivity. Are you okay with not having access to your financial records if your bandwidth's off? If your answer's no, not for 1 second a day, then it's probably not the right thing to move everything out. Or you have to put in an appropriate IT strategy where you've got real failover, and your failover might be that you've replicated everything to a private cloud traditional scenario that you own and can flip on automatically if things are off. That's not cheap. So you really get into, again, a sourcing strategy, and we have these all the time. I would say most people, at least that, again, Fortune 2000, they're not moving their financial stuff to where they don't have access to it and control it all the time. They're going to use the cloud to have essentially a third-party way to access and either do an analytics on their financial data, or have third-party applications like CRM or customer service or other types of things that leverage that data. But the financial data usually is staying, again, for Fortune 2000 or large companies in their traditional implementation, or at most a private cloud. So I don't think there's one size fits all, and it's just comfortability. But this bandwidth thing's not going away. It's like electricity. I mean, if you go back, in fact, I tell a story all the time. 80 years ago, 100 years ago, many companies had their own electricity generation capability because they couldn't rely on public utilities. Okay, almost nobody does that now unless they absolutely need it to be critical to the business. Like, I'm sure when you go out to the plant tomorrow, they have some type of generators that can run for a certain amount of time. Somebody local probably knows this. If there's an outage, guarantee it. Every large manufacturing company does that. Nobody else does. And I think the internet's the same way. Right now, you have to plan for downtime. At some point, it will be rare that you have to plan for downtime. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I think the piece that often doesn't get discussed here is we have to stop using traditional methodologies that we've been using for the last 10 or 20 years around relying on infrastructure reliability, and start putting some of that responsibility in the application architectures too. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing that in spades with greenfield applications, but what we're not seeing is how the legacy applications are going to evolve to that new methodology. And that's part of the challenge that you see around some of the ERP and financial services applications, mm-hmm. but you definitely see it already in the greenfield apps and some of the custom application architectures that are out there, or things that are getting rewritten.
Yep.
So I think that the challenge that we all have to do as an industry is we have to stop applying the traditional methodologies and start kind of, I hate to use the cliche, but think out of the box. We have to, if we were to do it all over again, how would we do it? Well, guess what? Cloud is doing it all over again. So how do we do it?
Yeah, that's a good observation. So let's kind of hit some of the architecture. I'll work my way into this, and we'll keep getting into questions. So this is just, again, just setting up. What Nigel and other speakers will do is try to attempt to talk about both the different models to give you examples of what we're seeing, but then also the hybrid model. And the reason we talk about the hybrid model is because, and we're going to start working our way into how we actually design converged cloud. We think that's a real important aspect because, again, when you get to this, it's about sourcing strategy. So you may decide that a certain application needs to be built a certain way today. You may change your mind tomorrow. Well, you don't want that to be a complete rewrite or complete redo because of what you decided to do today. So from that standpoint, we're very concerned about what we talk about as workload portability, or it's about really integration. So to me, a big thing about cloud that's different is your application starts with the API. If you don't have an API, I would be happy to have a discussion with you. That means you don't have a cloud native application. And really, there's a lot more required to have a cloud native application, but if you don't have an API, to me, you're not even in the ballpark. And to me, this is, again, getting to what's changing about cloud. Cloud is about the ability to either deliver a workload anywhere, or it's about to be able to access a workload anywhere. And that's very different from traditional computing, where, quite frankly, you might as well have welded your application into the platform, because that's pretty much what it would take to get it out, is cutting it out. So when we look about converged cloud, the important thing to point out is we're presuming you're working with multiple environments to deploy your application or your workload. So that could be from HP in a traditional sense. It could be from our managed cloud or public cloud. It could be from any third party. We don't care. I think that's a fundamental important thing that we're presuming. We're also presuming that you've got your choice of OS, your choice of virtualization technology, your choice of programming technology. Doesn't matter. The important part is what we're doing is providing this common API, which would be from our cloud platform, so that you can deploy your workloads, which is really important. You can manage them, secure them, and of course, also be able to update them across an application lifecycle. So that's really one aspect, and to me, I usually simplify it. Just think of that's the deployment and management aspect of cloud. How do I get the workload where I want it? Or how do I build it the way I want it? The second part is about consumption. And we think it's really important to separate these two things, because one is how do I get, as I said, the application there. The second is how do I allow people to use it? And those are two different aspects of cloud. They have completely different cultural issues within your company, completely different sometimes tools, and almost always different people, unless you're a smaller company. Because usually in larger companies, the people building the app and delivering it are not the same people who are managing it and running it. And so it's important to think about that when you think about, again, as an enterprise is using a cloud. Or quite frankly, if you're a smaller company just using a public cloud, but you're big enough to deliver your own apps, these are tools that you need. So when we look at that, there's a couple of important aspects to this. So one, it's the open architecture. So you can't have portability without an open architecture, or it's fairly hard, I would say. You need to be able to move between cloud models. So whether it's from public cloud A to B, or you first start on, say, a public cloud, and then you want to move your application in, which we see a lot. People develop applications and workloads in a public cloud, and they move them in. A lot also about cloud is really the right building blocks or the ability to decompose applications into a data model, the application logic model, and then really the access model or the view. And you don't always get this in a lot of cloud architectures where you can both do that, but then also be able to manage and monitor it with the tools that you choose. And so that's also very important. And then, of course, security and management aspects of this, being allowed to plug in your own. So we'll go into all of those as we drill into things. So when we talk about that architecture, and this is, again, kind of just drilling into it, what we're doing is delivering a solution where we've got our converged infrastructure capabilities. We'll talk about this while we're going through the day, but we're leveraging OpenStack as essentially I always call it the cloud runtime is the way I think about it, but that is the foundational component for our cloud platform. And we chose to do that because, quite frankly, we didn't think that we needed to go build our own. And there's a very broad ecosystem around OpenStack, which is really bringing this technology along very quickly. What we do then is we take the OpenStack distribution, and there's standard ways that you can extend it and plug in additional functionality. So that's what we're doing. We're using OpenStack as a way to have a common architecture across the different delivery models I talked about. And we think that's important because that means that if you're using any HP solution, you've got a common architecture to deploy your application. It also has a lot of benefits for us because it means we can build solutions with that common architecture, tools with that, and we can work with our ecosystem and partners around it. And so that's why we chose OpenStack. And today we're running our public cloud on it, and we're delivering solutions with our private and managed cloud. And so what I'm going to do today specifically is this afternoon, I'll drill into the software layer and talk about cloud management security. Other speakers and Nigel are going to kind of talk as we go down the stack. So what we want to do is kind of give you an idea of, well, what is that cloud management layer, which is a big part of Converged Cloud, and then what are the software tools and capabilities that we provide that let you deploy applications to that, provide self-service to those applications and services, and secure them. And then also just as important, I'll move over, keep really good. You still need infrastructure. You know, one of the things that comes up all the time is it's the, oh, well, everything's going to move to the cloud. There's no infrastructure anymore. Well, there's still plenty of data centers and infrastructure. It's just how those are delivered and what they need to do is going to continue to change. So Nigel will go into more details on the way we see converged infrastructure playing in a converged cloud environment. Yeah.
Probably it is just okay. When we started, everybody said cloud. What is cloud? It is the same that happened with you when you mentioned that you are a blogger. What is a blogger? It is a guy that is writing in the internet. No, the OpenStack, I think, is the major foundation for being open and to grow faster compared to other vendors. Recently, 2 weeks ago, IBM started to pour into OpenStack. So we were the pioneers, and we were the leaders in that direction. So the OpenStack would be the standard in terms of the cloud. This is one of the major advantages that HP is putting on the table.
Yep. Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about OpenStack. How familiar are people in the room with OpenStack? Different levels? So we started working with this well, actually, they've been working with it a while. I would say we decided internally about 1.5 years ago to start using OpenStack as our common foundation for our cloud strategy, and then we announced it about 1 year ago. To me, the reason that's relevant is that we're very ingrained in working with the community, and our view is just that when you look at platforms, and this is also some of my own view, I've been in the industry for 20 years, there always needs to be an open platform standard at every abstraction layer. Doesn't matter which one we're at. And so when people say, hey, why OpenStack? The reality is that this is going to be the open standard cloud platform. And the reason for that is that it's got by far the largest community and the most activity. And what you usually see is there's people that are early adopters, and then people just start leveraging it. And I think that's where we're at OpenStack is. It's at the point now where enterprises like an HP can use it. And I'll talk a little bit about our use for it. But what we're still doing is making it what I would call enterprise ready in terms of your average small IT shop can download it and get up and running if they needed to. I think that's the next wave of OpenStack. So today you mostly see service providers or ISVs like an HP that can take the OpenStack distro and then make it something that they can deliver a solution. You can see really good IT shops, like if I go to a financial company or a Fortune 1000 company, they've got the IT type of people to do it. We're not at the point where an SMB could just download OpenStack probably and run their business on it if they wanted to build their own cloud platform for some reason. So we've done a lot of work with that. We're very involved. We're one of the top 5 contributors for code. And so this is where it gets to, using open source as part of the strategy. It's not just using it, we're also contributing to the speed at which OpenStack moves forward. And the reason that's good is, again, it's about ecosystem. And then for us, we've got, again, an open standard product that we can deliver our cloud solution. So I'm not going to go into all the details, but I didn't know how much people were familiar with what we do on OpenStack.
Jay.
Yep.
curious, and I'll pause. There's two things I wanted to point out. One thing is a kind of a more of a jesting thing, and that is all the questions are on this side of the room. Nothing on this side of the room. But more importantly, can you talk a little bit more about OpenStack and maybe actually from the audience, what is your interest? What have you heard? Where do you feel OpenStack is going? So maybe not for right now, but be thinking about that. Personally, I'd just be curious to know where you are with that.
Well, I can talk more about it. I'm going to talk more this afternoon, too. I think one of the things I can do is just, I always feel like I need to demystify OpenStack because it's a big project and organization, but at the end of the day, what we usually do is talk about, there's really in essence, the kernel, which is the main OpenStack community release, which provides compute, storage, and networking capabilities, if we just simplify it. There's many other projects, but that's really the core, what you get with the community edition. What we then do is take that, and there's two main things fitting to the architecture. One, we create HP converged infrastructure plugins to that. So the same functionality, if you're familiar with our matrix operating environment, and then also our software products that provide the ability to, again, define and deploy and manage and secure workloads, what we have to do is plug that into the OpenStack environment so that we're able to expose those services up into your cloud platform and so you can use them. I would say this is one of the big value adds of the OpenStack framework is it's built in a scalable way where you can, again, plug a service in, it can self-describe what it does, and then it's available to that runtime to be used. The second thing we've done is added essentially an HP service layer so that if you're using one of our plugins, that means that you can, as a third party, leverage that into another solution. So in some cases, we're donating the advancements we've made back directly to the OpenStack group. We made a lot of advancements in quantum, for example, in the networking space, just as one. And in others, we're just providing those as a value add for our solution. But to me, that's an easy way. If you're not really familiar with OpenStack, you can think of it as at the core, it's a compute, storage, and networking runtime that lets you deploy a cloud and then deploy applications and manage applications. Questions about that? How much are people, I guess just since Chris asked, how much are you guys seeing people use OpenStack in Latin America? Since I'm in Latin America, I'll ask that, or the Caribbean and Latin America. Or is it still new and people are figuring it out? Someone over here has to answer, or I'll call randomly. You guys are quiet.
I don't know about
Yeah.
Latin America perspective, but in Canada, not a lot of production workloads, I think, are finding their way onto OpenStack Power Clouds yet, but there is a heck of a lot of interest, a lot of proof of concept work, a lot of development. And I'm interested in your perspective on, open is fantastic for the consumer. It provides a lot of choices. From an HP service provider standpoint, it seems a lot a bit different than your traditional business of providing, super reliable infrastructure in the data center and the services around that, of course, to moving to being a service provider where, one of the reasons I'm drawn to OpenStack as a customer is that I can build an integration with HP Cloud, for example. And sometime in the future, if I'm not happy with the service, or if another service provider comes along that, provides options that are a better fit for my business, I don't have to rebuild that integration. I can move to another OpenStack powered service provider. That seems like a big shift. I mean, if I fill my data center with HP gear, I'm not going to yank at that gear in 6 to 12 months for something that's a little bit cheaper. I can see that happening, though, in the future, where we talk about consuming services rather than buying infrastructure. And that seems like a very different approach for somebody like HP who's used to that more traditional model.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there's a couple things. One, I think there's more people running on an OpenStack solution than they realize because people are using it but maybe not broadcasting it. And then there's people that broadcast it. So obviously if you're using the HP public cloud or using Rackspace, we're both using OpenStack as underpinnings of services we're delivering today, and we're both doing quite a bit of business. But when you access the service, the OpenStack part is sort of like for the developers. from a business standpoint, you just care that you're getting compute or storage or business service. I think on the service provider, that's a really good question. And to me, maybe it's easy when I'm in this side of the room, which is I'm delivering technology, but I've been on the other side purchasing it too. I think that you have to compete on something higher than the infrastructure. If you're only this far, quarter inch or an inch above the infrastructure, you're going to be displaced by somebody because someone's going to offer a higher value service than what you are. So I look at the service provider thing where I think I'm looking at it as two ways. One, should I be delivering my own cloud? Do I have the core competency to do that, and is that going to be part of my value add as a service provider? And I think telco companies, you're going to see people do that because the latency or the reliability or the pipe or all the things they've always competed with, that is part of their core value in addition to the higher level services that they offer. I think other companies, you're going to see them choose to not build that, and then they're looking for someone who's going to give them, again, the best environment to build on top of, whether that's an HP or someone else. And that's where we've traditionally been. And so I think that the OpenStack component of our cloud platform is, as much as anything, it's about developer productivity, because they can train their IT staff on that and know that that skill is useful in other places. And then, quite frankly, it's about just efficiencies, because they can either work with us or work with the community to try and drive things into the platform that they want to see there. And I think that's what we've seen with the brief, it's really 10-ish years that we've seen open platforms really take hold in the IT industry. But that's what we've really seen happen, I think, in other areas of the stack. And I think that's going to happen here too. Any other questions? Okay, so just coming to the end, I want to set some context for the converged cloud solutions that we'll talk about more today as we provide additional examples. And then I've done my job, which is keep us on time, which means you'll get to go to coffee on schedule, and maybe a couple minutes ahead, actually. But what we'll do is, again, we talk about build and operation of cloud services, which can be either on a private cloud or obviously hosted somewhere in a managed or public cloud, and then consumption. So you're going to continue to use those use cases as we go through the day, whether we talk about cloud system and converged infrastructure or software solutions, or if we talk about the public cloud solutions. And we tend to see that work very well because, again, it gets to you have different decisions to make on each side. And I'll take some more questions now, and then I'll also be happy to talk over coffee. And then when we come back, Nigel's going to start. And first what we're going to do is take you into converged infrastructure the rest of the morning and more of how we see that as part of the cloud environment, which I talked about. And then I'll be back up later to talk about the software aspects some more. Go ahead, Erwin.
I don't remember if you talked about this, but I need to know more about the interoperability between the OpenStack and other solutions like cloud system or...
Sure. Yeah, so it's a good question. So a couple things that I could chat about. I know Nigel will talk about cloud system more. I think there's two aspects of interoperability for clouds. And OpenStack deals with one, well, actually there's more than two, there's many. OpenStack deals with one, which is if multiple cloud providers are using OpenStack, at least from your development standpoint or management standpoint, you're going to be familiar with the technology, the APIs, the way it works. That's one small aspect. So as a provider, what we're doing is looking at this from a couple additional ways. One, we have to provide tools that deal with sort of the pitfalls and the gaps and the last mile things that are missing. Plus, we know that the world's going to be hybrid and we're going to have many vendors. So if you look at what we do today, what we provide is tools that are already pre-integrated to not just OpenStack, but Amazon and other providers, so that if, let's say you just want to deploy, today you want to deploy this application to Amazon. Great, you don't have to deal with a lot of the intricacies because we already know how to deploy to Amazon. You just need to point us at your Amazon instance, and what we can do is get your application there. Now you still got to know how to run it and everything, but at least we can take care of that, because what you've seen with cloud, and I talk about this a lot, one of the downsides of cloud is that over the last, especially 12 years with the newer programming styles like Java and .NET and others, we've kind of made programmers lazy. What we told you was, you put your application in this container, and the container will take care of security. The container will take care of management. It'll take care of a lot of things, and unless you really, really need to know the details, don't worry about it. Well, the cloud breaks down that whole model. It exposes everything. I go to a public cloud, boy, I gotta know what's my compute power I need, what's my networking latency requirements, what's my storage, all these things that I didn't have to worry about when I was playing in my little public sandbox. And the reason that's important is because when I go into IT shops, they don't always have a multidisciplinary developer who knows all that stuff. They have like this one super ace person, and then they have everybody else. And so some of those tools are meant to take care of that, or ease the on-ramp, I would say. The other part's the operational side. How do I monitor one cloud environment versus the other? They look like black boxes. So what I get is the third-party tool that gives me maybe a third of what I'm used to seeing in my traditional data center. And so a lot of other things we're doing is we're trying to integrate into those cloud environments so that if you're on, say, an HP cloud and OpenStack, you can see a version of truth for monitoring management, but we want to give you the same visibility into an Amazon or Rackspace or any of those providers. So I think when you get to your question, there's a lot of different facets, and there's not one answer. It's going to depend, but our job as a provider is not just to provide a platform, but also the tools that integrate to those platforms to support the whole life cycle. That might have been a longer answer than you were hoping for, but there's a lot going on. Nigel will jump in here, add another bit. You have to use the mic.
I have to use the mic. My dollar. Thank you. So we'll be talking a lot this afternoon about cloud system and OpenStack and how the two come together, and we're going to dig into that in a lot of detail. So there's a long answer, and the short answer is yes, absolutely. It's right there, and we'll talk about it more this afternoon.
Yeah. Other questions, or would people like to grab a coffee?
Well,
here's one.
Can you expand a little bit more in terms of, and I'm going to put it this way, client versus, let's say, you can have right now, as far as cloud computer, you can have consumers versus business. Mm-hmm. And some people take the cloud as a consumer, some people take the cloud as business.
Yep.
And I've seen HP doing and building servers for Apple, Facebook, and all these companies that are using your infrastructure. Do you consider that using OpenStack help you guys enter into those of business? And the other question is that why did you change your whole view for developers as far as using cloud computer for developing applications and bringing the infrastructure and dropping a lot of consumer equipment that is going to be used, or it was going to be used for cloud access?
Okay, I got a couple questions there. Let me start, I might have to come back to the second part. Let me start with the first part, which has working with different providers like a Facebook or others helped us with, I think he asked it, has OpenStack helped us work with those providers like Apple and Facebook? I think it's actually a little bit more the other way. So we've got a lot of experience helping people build internet scale solutions, whether that's consumer solutions like Facebook Zynga, the Apple iTunes Store runs on our infrastructure solutions too. That I think has helped us with our cloud strategy. And there's two reasons. A, we can walk into almost any Fortune 1000 company and have a discussion about what they're doing. And to me, cloud is being driven by mobile and big data a lot. And then the third thing is sort of ubiquity of access, because this is now the new client. Your phone, I can do almost everything I need on my phone. I don't need to log in anymore on a PC. So I think those things go hand in hand. I think companies like the fact that we are being a good industry player as far as driving an open standard for cloud platform, because that means that they have the ability to plug in their own core competencies to it. instead of having to build a whole stack. That I think is a big part of us being a good partner in the industry. Now your second question I need to come back to, because I'm not sure if I really got it, the way you asked it. It was, why are we changing something around cloud computing with devices?
Most of the cloud access is going to be done by individuals.
Oh, okay. So are you getting, okay. So are you getting to what's our device strategy?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
What's your device? That's right.
Right.
Approach. What is the device strategy for HP as far as end user?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So when you look at how things are changing, and I tell this story because it's my own personal experience. So when I started in college in the mid-'80s, the way that I got access to the server room was I had to have a key because I was an engineering student and we had these nice Sun Spark stations. And so you know, you didn't normally have your own PC back then in your dorm room. So I had to go to the lab, have a key to the lab to get access to the computer. It sounds archaic. My kids would just laugh about that. And then, of course, laptops came around and got really popular about 15 years ago. And my point of this is all the access to computing has changed as much as the computing. And I think that is a huge, huge, huge game changer. Now, when you look at HP, we have a personal systems group. And the reason it's personal systems group is because we're building solutions for people to use, whether that's enterprise or consumers. Those devices are going to continually change every generation. So while that group might have focused on PCs 10 years ago, they are focusing on multiple form factors today, whether that's PCs or tablets. And we've got this Slate tablet that we just rolled out. I've got one, I don't have it here with me. And I think that's what you're going to see, is our job as a IT company with a group that makes essentially devices is to continue to change those form factors. So you're going to see us deliver solutions, and we do this today on any form factor. You're going to see us make different types of devices, whether that's laptops, tablets, or work with other partners with mobile devices of any kind. So we have many devices today. You should expect that we'll keep bringing new ones out based on what people want. So we're in the market today. That's the way I answer it. We just assume the form factors will continually change and we'll continue to deliver different types of devices.
I understand. What I'm trying to overlook is that taking sites has been an option for HP after many of the new line products were dropped. Let me give you an example.
Yeah, give me an example.
If you go to Macworld, HP is going to sponsor the whole Apple show, but with their printers products. If you go to, let's say, international technology convention, like you go to Las Vegas to the international convention, you're going to see HP presenting a lot of products that are end user products for more entertainment. But taking the side of the developer as far as the business side, do you think that HP overlook and say, listen, the future is going to be mobile, and let's take the server side and take the support for the business for them to get a converged cloud and develop everything there to provide more people to go to your specific product for the cloud are going to be, you know, sold even more? Or do you see HP thinking on a mobile device? Because I don't see mobile devices in the future for HP right now. I don't work at HP, of course, but I don't see
tablet I need to point at.
Yeah.
I think I'm getting your question. Let me make sure. So you're asking, what are we doing to move our solutions to a full cloud-based delivery for developers? Is that?
Thinking on the mobile.
Yeah. Yeah. So we actually have. Well, there's a few things we're doing. So one, we've got SaaS development solutions that are available today, and I'm happy to talk to you more about that. I don't have a presentation on it, but I'm happy to talk to you more about that. The other thing is, if you look at the public cloud delivery model, we do have a dev test solution that we have there that I can point you to, and that's something that we've been talking about a lot, because what we need to do, and I'll get into more of this afternoon, fundamentally how people build applications and deliver them is changing, especially for smaller IT shops. And so what we need to do is make sure that we provide the right type of solution for that model. And the reason I say that is, you know, what I would have bought 5 or 10 years ago is not the right solution. The idea is not just to rehost, load runner in the cloud, for example. That's great. That's one thing that people need, but that's not like the new paradigm. You have to completely rethink the application paradigm. And I'm going to talk more about this afternoon, but my answer is yes. And you can see versions of this. I'll point you to them. You can look at where we are delivering like full cloud-based solutions for application development and management via the public cloud. Hopefully that answers your question. If not, we're here all day and we can drill into it.
So let's go for a break now.
Okay.
The benefit is we got Shane and we got Nigel coming back. 2 more sessions this afternoon. So I appreciate all the discussion. Break maybe 10 minutes. Coffee's next door. Pick back up at 10:30.